The rope scratched her neck whenever she swallowed. It was a thin irritation compared to the weight of the crowd pressing in from the square, the smell of dust and sweat and old fear clinging to everything. The gallows creaked as if it were tired of bearing witness. Somewhere a woman sobbed, the sound breaking and reforming like water over stones. Someone else laughed. It was always like that when a town gathered to see a life end. Mercy and cruelty sat side by side and pretended they had nothing to do with each other. Eliza Moore stood straight because it was the only dignity left to her. Her hands were tied in front, the rope rough and biting. She had stopped struggling days ago. The jail had taught her the limits of breath and hope. Still, she felt the sun rising behind the courthouse and tried to remember the way morning used to feel when she woke in her own bed, when the world had not narrowed to a platform and a noose. Sheriff Calder read the charges with a voice that wanted to sound solemn but could not hide the satisfaction underneath. Murder, armed robbery, aiding and abetting. Each word fell like a stone. Eliza listened without flinching. She knew what she had done and what she had not. She had not killed the man they accused her of killing. She had not robbed the bank. She had loved the wrong people and trusted the wrong promises. That was a crime too, though no one ever wrote it down. When Calder finished, he looked at her as if waiting for something. A plea, a confession, tears. Eliza met his gaze and said nothing. Her throat felt tight, not from the rope but from the memory of her father teaching her to hold her head up, even when it hurt. The preacher stepped forward, murmuring words about salvation. Eliza barely heard him. Her eyes were on the horizon, on the thin line where the road cut through the sagebrush and disappeared into heat shimmer. She had watched that road for days from her cell window, imagining escape, imagining rescue, imagining nothing at all. It was easier to imagine nothing. A child screamed suddenly, sharp and frightened. The sound rippled through the crowd. People turned, confused. Hooves thundered. The earth seemed to vibrate underfoot, a deep rhythmic pounding that grew louder by the second. Dust rose like a living thing at the far end of the street. Eliza felt it before she saw him. A shift in the air, as if the world had taken a breath and held it. The rider came fast, reckless speed that made men step back without knowing why. The horse was dark, sweat slick on its flanks, eyes wild but controlled. The man astride it wore black that drank in the light. His hat sat low, shadowing his face. Two pistols rested easy at his hips, worn smooth by use. When he pulled the reins and the horse reared, dust exploded around them, and the crowd scattered as if struck. A name moved through the people in a whisper that sounded like a prayer and a curse together. Jonah Black. Eliza's heart slammed so hard it hurt. She had not seen him in 3 years, not since the night he rode out of her life and took half her breath with him. She had believed him dead, then worse than dead, then she had stopped believing anything at all. Jonah swung down from the saddle with a grace that came from long familiarity with danger. He looked older, harder. There were lines around his mouth that had not been there before, and his eyes were colder, but when they found her, something flickered, quick and dangerous as flame. Calder recovered himself and stepped forward, hand resting on his gun. Jonah did not look at him. "This woman is mine," Jonah said. His voice was calm, carrying easily across the square. "Untie her." A murmur surged. Calder bristled. "You got no claim here, Black. Law's decided." Jonah finally turned his head, his eyes fixed on Calder with a focus that made the sheriff swallow. "Law did not ask me," Jonah said. "And you know better than to hang my bride." The word hit Eliza like a blow. Bride. The crowd erupted. Questions flew. Laughter. Outrage. Calder's face flushed. "That's a lie," Calder snapped. "Everyone knows who you are. You ain't fit to marry a decent woman, much less her." Jonah smiled then, a thin curve that held no humor. "Decent has nothing to do with it." He stepped toward the gallows. 2 deputies moved to block him, hands shaking. Jonah did not slow. When he reached the first step, he stopped and looked up at Eliza. Up close, she could see the scar along his jaw, pale against dark stubble. She could smell leather and dust and something else that tugged at her memory. "You still stand straight," he said softly. She swallowed. "You came too late." "No," he said. "I came when I needed to." He turned back to Calder. "She is my wife in the eyes that matter. Untie her and I will leave your town without blood." Calder laughed, a brittle sound. "You think you can just ride in and steal a hanging?" Jonah's hand moved, not to his gun but to the inside pocket of his coat. He drew out a folded paper and tossed it at Calder's feet. Marriage license, he said. Signed in Red Creek, 3 years ago. Filed proper. Eliza's breath caught. Red Creek. The memory surged, bright and painful. A small office. Ink smudged on Jonah's fingers. Laughter that tasted like freedom. She had thought it a promise that would never be tested. Calder hesitated, then bent and picked up the paper. He read, his face darkening. This could be forged. Jonah's eyes hardened. Try me. The square felt like a loaded gun. Eliza's legs trembled. She did not know whether to hope or fear. Jonah had not spoken to her yet. Not truly. He had claimed her like property, like salvation. She did not know which it was. Calder looked at the clock mounted on the courthouse. Dawn had fully broken now, light spilling gold over the town. The rope around Eliza's neck seemed to burn. You leave town, Calder said slowly, and I might consider it. Jonah shook his head. We leave together. Calder's hand tightened on his gun. You force this and people die. Jonah stepped closer, until only a foot separated them. People always die, he said. The question is who. Time stretched thin. Eliza watched a bead of sweat run down Calder's temple. She thought of her mother's hands, soft and warm, braiding her hair. She thought of Jonah's back disappearing down the road, the ache that had hollowed her out. Calder exhaled. Untie her, he barked. The deputy nearest Eliza hesitated, then moved forward. His fingers fumbled at the knot. When the rope fell away, Eliza swayed. Jonah was there instantly, one arm around her, solid and warm. Her knees buckled and he held her upright as if she weighed nothing. The crowd roared, some in anger, some in relief. Jonah did not wait. He lifted Eliza and carried her down the steps. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing him in, the rhythm of his heart a steady anchor. They mounted the horse together. Jonah swung up first and pulled her in front of him. The animal surged forward, and they tore down the street, dust flying, shouts fading behind them. Only when the town was a blur did Jonah slow. Eliza's hands were still bound. She twisted awkwardly. Jonah reached around her and cut the rope with a knife. The fibers fell away and she flexed her fingers, pain and relief mingling. You should not have come, she said. Her voice shook. They will hunt you. He was silent for a long moment. The horse's hooves beat a steady path. They have been hunting me for years, he said. I am tired of running from the wrong things. She turned as much as she could to look at him. You left. I did, he said. I thought it would keep you safe. She laughed then, a broken sound. It did not. He flinched. I know. They rode until the land opened wide and empty. Jonah reined in near a stand of cottonwoods by a creek. He helped her down. Her legs trembled and he steadied her, hands gentle. They stood facing each other, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. You let them believe I was your bride, she said. He met her eyes. You were. She shook her head. A piece of paper does not make a marriage. No, he said. But it makes a promise. I broke it when I left. Her anger rose, hot and sharp. You vanished. No word. No warning. I waited. I sold my father's land. I followed men who promised work and found only trouble. I ended up in chains. His jaw tightened. I was marked, he said. By men who would have used you to get to me. I thought if I disappeared, you would be spared. And did you think about what that would do to me? She demanded. He closed his eyes briefly. Every day. Silence stretched. The creek gurgled softly, indifferent. They will not let this go, she said finally. They will say you stole a condemned woman. They can say what they like, he said. I am done letting others write our ending. She studied him, seeing the fear under the steel. Why now? He reached into his coat and drew out a small object, wrapped in cloth. He placed it in her hands. She unwrapped it to find a locket. Inside was a faded scrap of blue ribbon. My mother's, he said. I carried it through every fight. When I heard your name spoken in the wrong way, I knew I had already lost everything else that mattered. Her eyes burned. You cannot save me from what I have done. I am not trying to, he said. I am asking you to choose what comes next. The sound of distant hooves reached them. Jonah's hand went to his gun. Eliza looked toward the sound, then back at him. They are coming, she said. Yes, he said. She took a breath, feeling the sun on her face, the ache in her limbs, the weight of choice. She stepped closer and placed the locket back in his hand. Then we face it together. He searched her face, something like wonder breaking through. He nodded once. When the men came, they came hard and fast. Shots rang out. Jonah moved like a storm, precise and relentless. Eliza ran when he told her to, then turned back when she could not leave him alone. She grabbed a fallen gun, her hands steady in a way she had not known they could be. Fear burned away, leaving clarity. When it was over, the land was quiet again. Jonah stood breathing hard, blood seeping from a wound in his side. Eliza was at his side instantly, pressing cloth to the wound. "You are hurt," she said. He smiled faintly. "Still here." She laughed through tears. "So am I." They did not go back to the town. They followed the road until it faded into open land. At night, they made a fire and sat close, sharing stories and silence. The future was uncertain, dangerous, wide open. As dawn came again, Eliza watched the light spread and felt something shift inside her. She was not the woman who had stood on the gallows. She was not only a bride claimed by a feared man. She was someone who had chosen to live, to fight, to love with eyes open. Jonah took her hand. "Whatever comes," he said, "I will not leave." She squeezed his fingers. "Then neither will I." The sun rose fully, and they rode on, not away from the past but toward a life they would write together, breath by breath.